What, you might wonder, is President Trump thinking about in negotiations to end the war with Iran? You? Gas prices? Inflation? Not so much. Actually, not even a little bit. China is more economically and technologically powerful because of Apple. What your love of iPhones has done to the global economic power equation. And you know I love this. Our CBS News Radio tribute tonight, Lyndon Johnson, voting rights in a speech that changed American law and politics for decades. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Very happy to be back and very happy to welcome you to the Takeout. Hear President Trump say it as he did today. He and Chinese President Xi Jinping have almost nothing to talk about when it comes to the war with Iran. Really? It's all going to work out, Trump said. Oh, and oil prices and inflation, which can only be described as rising at noticeable and financially irritating rates, will all come magically down when this war is over. You will be forgiven for asking yourself, wait, have I heard any of this before about gas prices, inflation, the end of the war? Yes, you have. Almost every week since the war began, in fact. Now, as you know, the president talks a lot, takes a lot of questions. This is part of his laudable transparency and intentional misdirection. Seeing and hearing the president in action is not always about fixed statements. That's kind of an understatement. Sometimes it is an elaborate illusion, saying one thing in public while maneuvering in another direction in private. So be it. Presidents have different styles, negotiations, and rhetoric. But this statement, the one I'm about to play, may say more about the president's actual intentions and the economic pain, rather, he is willing to endure and, by extension, force you to endure, while, as we know, the Strait of Hormuz remains mostly closed and talks to end Iran's nuclear ambitions bog down like a jalopy in a mud bog. Here is what the president said today before leaving for China.
When you're negotiating with Iran, Mr. President, to what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's the only thing that motivates.
Something tells me that soundbite is, as they say, going to have legs and political consequences. We begin tonight with Ed O'Keefe, who joins me here at the family table. Ed, great to see you.
Good to see you.
President was very clear there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think about it at all.
Yeah.
American economic matters as it relates to Iran. Now, I understand prioritization. Presidents do it all the time, but that's going to circle in the atmosphere.
It is, and not only prioritization, but like a signature bedrock original promise of this guy when he started running for president more than 10 years ago, right? Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. I'm going to work on immigration. It was right there with it. So for him to continue to focus on that and try to
But
achieve
also
that
part of the re-election campaign is I'm going to tame inflation and I'm going to make your economic situation better than it was.
Yep, exactly. And so now, to your point, it probably will end up in advertising in the coming days, as well as some other things he said today along the rope line regarding redistricting and regarding the state of the economy. And he continues to say, just hang with me, be patient, because the moment this war is over, everything's going to plunge back to where it was. Economic data, economic history would suggest it takes a little while. What is it our Jill Schlesinger likes to say? Inflation goes up an elevator and comes back down the stairs.
Right, exactly.
And that's what's inevitably going to happen.
Quick up, slower down.
And he's trying to convince the voters, hang with me despite this pain. But this inflation report, with all the different ways groceries and other goods you buy at the hardware store and on other places are climbing up now, in part because of the oil costs. You know, this really now, heading into the summer, starts to hurt a lot more for America.
And Ed, you know this better than I do. For weeks now, the president has basically been saying the same thing.
Same exact message. Hang with me. The war's almost over. When it's over, the prices will come down. And what happens is he continues to say that. Support for him or his stewardship of the economy and the war continues to go down. So, but it's not in his nature to suddenly reverse course in hopes of improving poll numbers, because the only one that really matters to them is that the Republican support continues to sustain itself for the most part. Therefore, they believe going into the midterms, their base at least is there to show up and elect Republicans.
As best we can tell, Ed, what is the White House interpretation of what's at stake for the president in China with Xi Jinping?
He told me directly, trade. Trade is the big thing.
Not Iran.
Not Iran. He said Iran, we'll talk about that, but we've mostly got that under control. But trade, to me, he said, is the biggest concern. That is why you're seeing Tim Cook. That is why you're seeing other, not only tech executives, but other financial executives. Elon Musk is invited. This is the thing. They've told us all these guys are invited.
Right.
Head of Cargill, head of Visa, head of MasterCard, Apple, and others. We don't know for certain that they're going, and they're not all on Air Force One with him.
Got it.
They'll get there or they won't. But the point is, you've invited all these different executives to come to demonstrate American economic might, hope that they cut some new deals, and he can turn around and say, look what I've done. And it's also important to point out, because you might think to yourself, do you normally travel with CEOs like this? The German chancellor, the French president, the British prime minister have all gone there in the last several months with business executives from their country in tow. So the U.S. is doing exactly what the Europeans did in bringing their business guys along.
Ed O'Keefe, always great stuff. Thank you very much. CBS News national security analyst Aaron McClain joins me now. He also hosts the Most Excellent School of War podcast. Aaron, great to see you.
Of course.
Do you buy it when the president says we don't really have much to talk about with China when it comes to ending the war with Iran?
Well, there's a couple of aspects to that question, Major. The first is, would China have the sway over Iran to even accomplish the kinds of things America would find it helpful?
Even exert some subtle pressure.
That's right. And I think the answer, by the way, is yes. Iran has a lot of sway over Iran. But then the second question
China has a lot of sway over Iran.
China has a lot of sway over Iran. The second question, however, is would they, under any circumstances, spend the kind of capital they would need to spend to do that to help Donald Trump out? There, I think it's substantially murkier what the road ahead would be. And of course, the Chinese have plenty of concessions that they would like President Trump to make to them on issues that they see as zero-sum issues, Taiwan, for example.
Exactly. What about the Chinese economic ties with Iran, particularly what travels to them in terms of energy through the Strait of Hormuz? Is that a leverage point for the president?
So the fact is, China has been getting less and less of its energy from the Strait of Hormuz in recent years. China looks at the world very differently than Donald Trump looks at the world. China looks at the world in a zero-sum fashion, in a world that's increasingly dangerous, in a world where it can be encircled. And it's been focusing on maximizing energy production at home, electrifying its country, getting power from its coal and transforming it into electricity. That said, it does buy a lot of oil from Iran. It does get stuff from the Gulf. The Gulf being closed off at the Strait of Hormuz is net harmful to everyone, including China, but they probably are a little bit better off than some of their neighbors right now. So not quite as in the pain point.
So it's an irritant, but it does not bring them to their knees or anywhere close.
Certainly not in any time soon.
So, Aaron, you know, in the Middle East, lots of people, lots of nations play both sides against the middle. Relations that are conducted in public are sometimes not always reflective of relationships that are going on in private. Today, there was some interesting Q&A between Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator from South Carolina, Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, about Pakistan, which has tried to assert itself as a mediating host nation to conversations between Iran and the United States. Please, let's listen.
Are you aware of reports that Pakistan are allowing their bases to be used to park Iranian aircraft, General Kane?
Sir, I've seen one report on that.
Well, is it accurate?
Sir, I think based on the variety of classification matters.
Let me just say, do you agree if it is accurate, that is sort of inconsistent with it being a peace mediator?
Sir, I wouldn't want to comment on that based on the ongoing negotiations and Pakistan's role.
Secretary Hegseth, if the mediator is allowing reconnaissance aircraft in Iran to be parked in Pakistani air bases, do you think that's consistent with being a fair mediator?
I wouldn't want to get in the middle of these negotiations. I want maximum efficacy
I
for
want
our
to get in the
people.
middle of these negotiations. I don't trust Pakistan as far as I can throw them. If they actually do have Iranian aircraft parked in Pakistan bases to protect Iranian military assets, that tells me we should be looking maybe for somebody else to mediate. No wonder this damn thing is going nowhere.
Nowhere, this damn thing is going nowhere. No wonder, rather. Evaluate that exchange and how careful both the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the defense secretary were about not getting into any specifics about this or the implications, which to Senator Graham appear obvious.
Well, I have some personal experience with Pakistani duplicity as a veteran of Afghanistan.
Yes, indeed.
The Afghanistan war was conducted with American war material flowing through Pakistan while the elements of the Pakistani state were funding, supporting, even in times directing the Taliban. So this is, as you point out, not a new development for this part of the world. I took their answers there to essentially acknowledge that what's happening is fact. The fact that they didn't want to respond to it substantively indicates to me that it's an uncomfortable fact. It's not a great look for an impartial mediator to essentially be, should hostilities resume, the military consequence would be that we're very unlikely, of course, to strike targets on an airfield in Pakistan. So those planes essentially are out of bounds should there be a new round of military strikes. But Pakistan is the channel. That's the channel the Trump administration is working with, and they don't want to spoil that for whatever reason.
And the president had no discouraging words today about Pakistan, which is also worth noting. Aaron McClain, always great. Thanks so much. Inflation, as Ed O'Keefe suggested before, is at its highest level in nearly 3 years. That's in part, quite considerable part, to energy prices keep going up. Why? The war with Iran. In April, the Consumer Price Index, which, as we all know, is a key inflation indicator, rose annual rate 3.8%, up from 3.3% in March. I am joined now by Arjun Murthy. He's a partner at the firm Veriton, which focuses on the energy sector. Arjun is also the author of the much-read, energy-focused Substack newsletter, Super Spiked. Arjun, we know the linkage.
Yes,
break it down for us. The linkage between higher global energy prices and what every American does and feels everywhere down their economic life.
you know, the simplest explanation I can give is the strait staying closed. And as you pointed out in prior segments just now, it's been promised it's going to open any day now, yet it's still closed. That disruption is going to feed through to higher oil prices, ultimately, therefore, higher gasoline prices and inflation. The market is at all-time highs, the S&P 500 and other stock markets. It's buying into the rhetoric that, hey, it's going to open any day now, yet it stays closed. And every day that that strait stays closed, people can expect inflation overall fed through energy and gasoline prices to be higher, as I think we saw in today's print that you're referencing.
Arjun, the president said today oil prices were only $99 a barrel. He thought they could be higher. Well, I'm sure as an abstraction, yes, they could be higher. But $99 is still pretty high.
It's high. I will say most energy experts, I put myself in this category as well. If we were told that there's going to be a 10 million barrel a day net supply disruption out of the Middle East, we would have thought oil would have been perhaps even $150 to $200 a barrel. In part, it is only 99 or 100 because of the shale oil revolution. And as a country, we are significantly less dependent on the Middle East. Last year, also China, which is the world's largest oil importer, built up a lot of strategic petroleum reserves, perhaps in anticipation of a conflict. Who knows the reason? But at least for the time being, they've also been in better shape to withstand this major disruption. But that's just simply buying time. If this thing lasts into the summer or into the fall, I think you're going to see those much higher prices that people had been expecting all along. And again, higher oil prices very directly means higher gasoline prices.
And Arjun, when the president says, as he has so many times, when this is over, everything will come immediately down. Is that true? Because I've read lots of analysts who say there's sufficient damage to infrastructure in the Gulf and around the Strait of Hormuz that it's going to take a while to repair all that damage and restore, as you mentioned, that 10 million barrel per day loss of energy supplies.
I got to be honest, the simple truth is I don't think people know what the extent of the damage is. There's been some reported damage to the LNG facilities in Qatar, but in terms of oil fields and how quickly they come back, I think it remains a major uncertainty. I think the president is partly correct in that if we truly did have an opening, let's just say tomorrow, you would see the price of WTI oil and therefore gasoline prices fall by some decent amount. But if you remember, prior to this war, there was expectation of major oversupply, perhaps $50 oil and sub $2.50 a gallon gasoline. I don't think there's any scenario where we're going back to those kind of very low levels. So there is an expectation there's going to be at least some disruption. There's going to be some ongoing geopolitical risk premium. And the world has, I think, forever changed as a result of this war. So yes, in the short term, if the strait opened tomorrow, oil and gasoline prices would probably come back down, but not go back to the previous levels. And then when we look forward, I think risk reward for oil and gasoline does remain skewed to the upside relative to what would have been the case absent any war.
Arjun Murthy, great stuff. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, Hantavirus outbreak update. The total number of confirmed and suspected cases has reached 11. The 18 Americans that were potentially exposed on a cruise ship are in quarantine in Nebraska and Georgia. CBS News medical correspondent Dr. Celine Gounder joins me now. Dr. Gounder, catch us up in terms of what's going on with the Americans and what the messaging is to Americans about the relative risk to them in quarantine and to the population in general.
So Nebraska Medical Center is one of the best biocontainment units in the country. 16 passengers are in quarantine there. One is in a higher level unit because of a positive test result. So that person is in what we call isolation because we are worried that they may in fact have hantavirus, whereas the others are strictly just exposed and so are just being quarantined. There are also 2 passengers who went to Emory in Atlanta, a couple, one of whom was having symptoms. But as far as we've been told, there's no testing schedule for the passengers who have no symptoms. And the start date of their 42-day monitoring period has not been set. Theoretically, it really should be day 0 should be the date of disembarkation because that's the last known date of potential exposure. It's also important to understand that there are no FDA-approved treatments for the hantavirus. The most promising antibody treatment was shelved last year when its funding ran out. So if patients worsen, the care is supportive only. So things like ventilators, ECMO, which is a heart-lung bypass machine, there is no specific drug to give them, and the tools that doctors have for patients who get sicker are the same as really they had 30 years ago.
So when you try, Dr. Gounder, to assess the risk in this scenario, how are you doing that?
I think some people are comparing this to COVID. They are right in certain respects. This is a novel, at least to them, virus. This is something that's coming out of the blue to them. But COVID is spread easily through the air, often from people with no symptoms. And it infects both the upper and lower respiratory tracts. It is also an infection to which no one had any previous immunity in the past. Whereas hantavirus doesn't spread in the same way. It is a lower respiratory tract infection. Because of the incubation period, we had a long head start before some of these people started to get sick, the second round of cases. And so that gave us time actually to contain this. However, the response infrastructure is weaker now than it was in 2020. We have no CDC director. You have the NIH director who's acting as CDC director, so wearing both hats. The FDA commissioner was, says he resigned. The United States has left the WHO. Secondly, you also have public reaction. You have millions of people who are feeling deja vu from 2020 and a lot of concern that this could spiral. They're concerned that the government may not be honest with them. And I think this is really fear about COVID that is still lingering. And this new virus, at least to them, hantavirus, is triggering that old alarm. And we really need to acknowledge that before trying to reassure people, because if we don't, we lose the audience before we even get to the facts.
In the medical literature, there is quite a bit of data about a 2018 outbreak that occurred at a birthday party, I believe, in Argentina. What did that teach us about how hantavirus spreads?
Yeah, so this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is the Bejing outbreak. It's a small town in Patagonia in Argentina. One person got infected from rodent droppings. They attended a birthday party while sick, and then the virus spread from there. A total of 34 people were infected, 11 died. And what they found in this study was that the spread was driven by just a few sick people with very high viral loads who spent an extended period of time in enclosed spaces with many other people. Once officials enforced isolation for the cases and quarantine of contacts, transmission dropped from about 2 cases per original case to below 1. And so once you get to below 1, that's where you stop the outbreak. And here's what matters now. Most of the transmission in that outbreak tracked with close, prolonged contact. But there were 3 cases in that total outbreak that could not be explained in that way, where some form of droplets in the air would be the simplest explanation. And there are 3 people who tested positive without intimate contact with other known cases. So we may be seeing that picture. I think the CDC's current threshold, which is going to sound familiar to people because it's what we actually use for infection control and droplets, is within 6 feet for 15 minutes in an enclosed space is considered being a contact. So that's the cutoff to determine if you're high risk for quarantine decisions.
Dr. Celine Gounder, thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Still to come on this excellent program we call The Takeout, OpenAI CEO, let me get that straight, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, he takes a stand, how he defended himself and his company, the lawsuit brought by ex-business partner and fellow tech billionaire Elon Musk. Also, Tim Cook, speaking of tech billionaires, heads to China with President Trump, what role the Apple CEO could have on the summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Tim Cook's actually moved to another role, but we'll get into that. Plus, Democrats weigh what to do after their newly drawn congressional map in Virginia is blocked by the Commonwealth Supreme Court. Our reporter panel will assess that and a whole lot more. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Man, I have not been here for a while. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman took the stand today to defend himself in a lawsuit brought by former business partner Elon Musk. Musk is suing OpenAI, Altman, and the company's president, Greg Brockman, over accusations that they went back on their promise to Musk that OpenAI would remain a nonprofit entity. Musk gave OpenAI $38 million when it first launched in 2015 as that nonprofit, with a mission, it said, was to ensure that AI would benefit all of humanity. In 2019, Altman changed his mind and created a for-profit subsidiary that is now valued at more than $852 billion. Paresh Dave joins me now. He's a senior writer for Wired and has been tracking this trial in the courtroom off and on. So, Paresh, in every story, there's a so what factor. What is the so what of the outcome of this clash between Altman and Musk for AI and for people who are watching this space somewhat casually?
I see it as 2 things. There's the practical, OpenAI could cease to exist as a company. It seems like that is an extreme scenario that the judge will not go for if Musk wins this case. But if Musk wins this case, there could be governance changes at OpenAI, more oversight of this relationship between its nonprofit arm and its for-profit arm. All of that, stands to be good in the name of accountability in the tech industry. But I think the broader takeaway here is that there are people like Elon Musk who are willing to use their resources to really fight for what they believe in and to use litigation as a strategy to diffuse and distract competitors. And that can be something that's going to be more and more to be reckoned with if other billionaires in the tech industry choose to pursue this course that Musk has kind of trailblazed.
And speaking of those other tech billionaires, how are they, meaning how is the AI industry as it currently exists watching this case? Or is it?
It is, because everyone wants to know, what's the juicy bits that are coming out and being revealed right. in this trial. We've already seen revelations about how Elon Musk came to help one of his top lieutenants have children because of health issues. She was unable to find a lifelong romantic partner. He helped her through that. We got a lot of backstory about that. We've gotten deep insight into OpenAI President Greg Brockman because of a diary that he kept for years, and that diary has been released in the context of this trial. We're getting today, we got a ton of insight into Sam Altman and how he operates, because Musk's attorneys got a chance to cross-examine him. And, hours of questioning about whether Altman is trustworthy. We learned about some of his personal investments and how large those stakes are. I think that's what the AI industry is watching. We've got some fascinating egos and personalities at play. How do they interact? And what do they
and on
do
that point,
outside of these companies?
And on that point, Paresh,
Yeah.
what were some of the takeaways about Sam today that might either be positive or possibly negative, reputationally or for the future of OpenAI, based on today's goings on in the court?
So one of the funny exchanges was Musk's attorneys asking Sam Altman about how Sam Altman sits on the board of both the nonprofit and for-profit arms of OpenAI, and he is also CEO of both of them. And he was asked, would he ever fire himself as CEO? And Sam was like, I've not really contemplated that, but it's possible that there could be some crazy scenario in which he would fire himself. But that was just a funny, odd moment as Musk's legal team really tries to impress on the jury that Altman is not a trustworthy character. Another interesting bit was when Altman was asked about whether he holds a stake in OpenAI, which he had told Congress previously that he does not, but he kind of does through other investments that he's made, and those investors then invested in OpenAI. And so he kind of has a stake in OpenAI. And he was asked whether he would update Congress and clarify and correct the record. Last night, he and OpenAI got new questions about his conflicts of interest potentially from Congress just before he was going to testify. It seems like an interesting coincidence. He was asked about whether he would respond to that.
Very good. Paresh Tavi of Wired Magazine, thank you so much. President Trump is bringing more than a dozen top business executives. Ed O'Keefe talked about this earlier. I keep name-checking him because he's really good at this stuff. On his trip to China. We'll take a look at those involved and the Apple of it all next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. As we mentioned, President Trump will be joined in one capacity or another by 16 top U.S. business executives while he is in China. Among the notable names, Elon Musk, Tesla and other companies, Larry Fink of BlackRock, Tim Cook of Apple. CBS News contributor, that's really good news, by the way, contributor, Patrick McGee joins me now. He is the author of a book I highly recommend, Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company. Patrick, it's great to have you on the program. I appreciate your time. Talk to my audience about this role of the business executives and Trump going to China, and quite separate from the war in Iran, some of the other economic factors at stake.
Well, you're right to mention the war in Iran. I mean, that's essentially what we don't want the summit to be about. You don't want this to be the Cold War summit. I mean, you don't want Taiwan to come up very much as Beijing wants that to happen. So by sort of stacking the guest list, if you will, with a bunch of corporate executives, I think Washington is properly signaling that this is all about, trade, investments, guaranteed investments from China towards soybeans and things like that. The more that they can gear the discussion towards things like that rather than Cold War issues, the better.
What is the takeaway from your book? I've read it, but my audience hasn't, about Apple and China and what was gained by Apple and its stockholders, but what was lost for America long term?
American capitalism is very much shareholder-first capitalism. And so clearly Apple has gotten a lot out of this relationship. I mean, it's a $4 trillion company with more than $100 billion just in profits. But we don't have, as a nation, all that much capability in terms of building something like the iPhone or any number of other things. I mean, it's really tough to find electronics that are mass made in America. And so the book is really very much about Apple training a rival nation, an adversarial nation, to do all those things. And so we've, in a sense, traded our profits for capabilities. So we no longer know how to really do this stuff, and China knows how to do it in spades. And they're creating an industrial juggernaut, or have created an industrial juggernaut. And it's only getting bigger. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, just because, it matters when the president of the United States goes to China and is aware of just how many choke points China controls in the economy, whether that's rare earths or lithium-ion batteries or solar panels, and increasingly things like battery supply chains and electric vehicles. That's really concerning. And the way they got there is essentially that they lured in foreign capital, they lured in foreign expertise, and Apple was just the biggest, baddest company to sort of go and do it and train up literally millions of people.
Patrick, about big topics, and this certainly is one, lots of people have different opinions, and I want to give you a chance to respond to Andy Kessler, who wrote in the Wall Street Journal recently about your op-ed that Tim Cook has been harmful to American interests. And he writes, a recent New York Times op-ed headline reads, Tim Cook was great for Apple investors. He was not as great for America. The piece goes on to suggest Apple enabled China's Xi Jinping as our adversary. This is so wrong, it borders on satire. His point is that not just did stockholders, but lots of America, the Chinese middle class, and lots of other things that accrue to America's net benefit happened as a result of this relationship.
Well, the only thing he quoted there was the headline, and that's the only part of the piece I didn't write. So it'd be nice if I had more of a head-on criticism, if he actually could engage with my arguments or give some sense that he actually read the book. I thought it was a pretty weak piece, and I'm disappointed he didn't name check me. That would have been nice. Look, my point is not that Tim Cook's legacy is bad. My point is that it's unwritten and that a journalist properly needs to talk about the trade-offs. Clearly, this has been a great relationship for Apple, and it's been a great relationship for China. I'm just pointing out that a lot of Americans don't have jobs. A lot of capacities for manufacturing have been given away. It's not so much that we even lost, so much as we actually enabled a great competitor. So, I want someone to grapple with my actual argument, which is that Apple played a nation-building-like effort in China by investing literally over the years hundreds of billions of dollars and training up millions of people. I mean, if you're only dealing with the headline written by somebody else, you're not really grappling with the seriousness of the argument.
Patrick McGee, I'm glad you're a contributor. One of many conversations I hope to have in the book, Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company. Excellent work. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Major.
Up next, Kash Patel faces, lots of questions over allegations of excessive drinking. He strongly denied them, and you'll hear how. I'll speak with our reporter panel about that and a whole lot more next on The Takeout. Welcome back. FBI Director Kash Patel. Well, again, this has become kind of a ritual in Washington, pushing aggressively back against allegations that he drinks too much on the job. And I'm not talking about water or juice. Well, maybe a kind of juice. Anyway, we'll not delve into that too deeply. Here is a heated exchange he had with Maryland Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen from a Senate hearing today. Listen.
Multiple reports, including reporting by The Atlantic, have alleged episodes of excessive drinking, unexplained absences, and behavior that concern current and former FBI and DOJ officials. Is it your testimony that those allegations are categorically false?
Unequivocally, categorically false.
So there have been no occasions during your tenure when FBI personnel were unable to promptly reach you?
Absolutely not. You can ask my entire workforce. They hear from me at every single hour of the day, as do these great gentlemen here, as do the men and women of the interagency and state and local law enforcement and the White House.
And so there have been no occasions when your security detail had difficulty waking or locating you. Is that right?
Nope, it's a total farce. I don't even know where you get this stuff, but it doesn't make it credible because you say so.
So let me ask you this. Are you willing to take the test, it's called the audit test, that members of our active duty military and others take to determine whether they have a drinking problem?
I'll take any test you're willing to take.
I will take it, Director Patel. I'll take it. You ready to take it?
Let's go.
Yes or no?
Let's go. Side by side.
I'll take it.
Maybe it'll be on pay-per-view or something. Let's bring in our reporter panel. Managing editor at Bloomberg, Mario Parker, congressional reporter for Notice, soon to be renamed The Star, Paul Kane. Paul is also a contributor to 535, which launched today. So, Paul, let's not bury the lead. What's 535?
535 is a streaming news site.
We love streaming news sites.
Yes.
I'm very much in favor of them.
Yeah. It'll be a couple hours a day when Congress is in session, the House especially. It's being run by three great people in D.C., David Woodruff, Kristen Wilson, and Brody Mullins. We've got a bunch of us who are contributors, or like the old pros of Capitol Hill, who are helping with interviews, sharing our reporting on their site, and talking about policy.
And deep dive conversations with lawmakers about that.
I spent 20 minutes with Angus King today talking about things like the Forest Service, the Postal Service, and LIHEAP.
Right.
And those are sort of conversations that get lost too often, and we're just trying to give them
more granularity, more on policy. That's great stuff. So your takeaway from Kash Patel in this ongoing semi-circus?
Look, he is performing for an audience of one.
We say it all the time. Doesn't mean it's not true.
He will stay on his job as long as the president sees him fighting and appreciates how he's fighting and doesn't think he's becoming embarrassing. Others who have fallen, Kristi Noem comes to mind, is somebody who got to a congressional hearing and things didn't look good, and she got trapped into a question about whether she had actually, shaded the truth on letting Trump know about what she was doing, and that became her undoing. Yeah. It wasn't all of the other scandals. It was finally her testimony making Trump look bad.
And Mario, about a week or two ago, a lot of people in Washington would have said Kash Patel would be out before Marty McCary, the FDA director. And he resigned today under incredible pressure and lots of leaks from the White House that he was either going to be fired or have to resign.
Yes, no, absolutely. We saw McCary. The Maha movement is taking some political hits as well. RFK Jr. standing also out there has made that much more prominent. But yeah, to your point, we saw Kash Patel fighting the good fight today. He didn't over-torque it in the way that we saw Kristi Noem do a few months ago. I think that was important as well. He found a clever foil there in Van Hollen, who both of them had this juxtaposition.
He had some awful research about a Van Hollen bar bill.
That was the thing with the Kilmar Garcia, Albrego Garcia photo at the height of that imbroglio some time ago. And then also, obviously, Kash Patel, not only the allegations there, but the USA hockey team photos.
Yeah, where there was actual drinking. I want to play for you both something that happened yesterday. The president playing a little bit of a game with the future political viability of J.D. Vance, the current vice president, and Marco Rubio, his secretary of state and national security advisor. Watch it.
Who likes J.D. Vance? Who likes Marco Rubio? All right. Sounds like a good ticket. J.D. and that was a perfect ticket.
Laying on of hands. That's coming soon. Well, not soon, but in a while.
Yeah,
and he loves this.
May of 2026, I can't do math. Where do we get to January of 2028?
Yeah.
What are the filing deadlines for Iowa, New Hampshire?
Right.
Look, there's a lot of buzz about Rubio. Things are going good for Rubio right now, and Vance is a little bit behind the scenes, especially because he's not comfortable being out there
on Iran
and Venezuela and a warrior to speak. But are you peaking too soon if you're Marco Rubio? Mike Pence probably looked pretty good at this point in Trump 1.0.
Yeah.
That didn't turn out so well.
Mario, your take?
A couple of weeks ago, President Trump just curiously tweeted out his ratings from The Apprentice back in the day. Mm-hmm. And we see that continues to live on right now. We see him essentially at the podium, behind the desk, kind of egging on this rivalry or stoking this rivalry between Vance and Rubio, even as both men try to downplay that there is, if anything there.
But they can't downplay it. It's very real.
And he never says who the ticket should be.
No, it just says a ticket. Mario Parker, Paul Kane. Paul, all good luck on 535. We're a nerdy show here. We love granularity. We love digging into policy. All the best with that.
All right.
Which one? Over here? Over here, two. You're sure, guy? You're sure? Okay, up next, our CBS News Radio flashback. You know I love it. Today, we will hear from the 36th President of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, his name, a plea for passage of the Voting Rights Act back in 1965. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. We take you to the spring of 1965. It was a troubled time in America, and President Lyndon Johnson, fresh off the deeply disturbing images of Bloody Sunday in Selma, and for those of you not old enough to know about that refers to the beatings suffered by protesters crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, en route, they hoped, for Montgomery. All this in pursuit of voting rights for African Americans, a cause Johnson was about to make his own with a speech to a joint session of Congress.
This is CBS News correspondent Dave Shoemaker with a CBS News special report on President Johnson's speech to a joint session of Congress. Tonight's appearance by the president on Capitol Hill was at the invitation of congressional leaders, at least formally, and is considered somewhat unusual. It's taken as a sign of Mr. Johnson's concern with recent events in Alabama, his desire for quick action on voting rights, and also perhaps his sensitivity to criticism that the administration has not been doing all it could in this area.
CBS News Radio continued its coverage, painting a portrait of a president about to lay down a rhetorical marker for the ages.
You have just heard House storekeeper Fishbake Miller announce the President of the United States. The President comes down the aisle, nodding to familiar faces, men that he's known most of his adult life here on Capitol Hill. He now mounts the podium, shakes hands with those standing just to the side, reaches up to shake hands with the Vice President and House Speaker McCormick.
CBS News Radio then carried the remarks, which echo today as the nation assesses anew what voting rights mean.
I speak tonight for the dignity of man and the destiny of democracy. I urge every member of both parties, Americans of all religions and of all colors, from every section of this country, to join me in that cause. At times, history and fate meet at a single time, in a single place, to shape a turning point in man's unending search for freedom. So it was at Lexington and Concord. So it was a century ago at Appomattox. So it was last week in Selma, Alabama. There, long-suffering men and women peacefully protested the denial of their rights as Americans. Many were brutally assaulted. One good man, a man of God, was killed. There is no cause for pride in what has happened in Selma. There is no cause for self-satisfaction in the long denial of equal rights of millions of Americans. But there is cause for hope and for faith in our democracy and what is happening here tonight. For the cries of pain and the hymns and protests of oppressed people have summoned into convocation all the majesty of this great government, the government of the greatest nation on earth.
Johnson went on, as presidents do on rare occasions, to lift our sights above the day-to-day to something higher, something deeper.
But rarely in any time does an issue lay bare the secret heart of America itself. Rarely are we met with a challenge, not to our growth or abundance, or our welfare or our security, but rather to the values and the purposes and the meaning of our beloved nation.
The date, March 15th, 1965. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act August 6th, 1965. That was carried on CBS News Radio as well. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is The Takeout, relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. Daily Report, coming up.